So the topic I have decided is rather general. The idea is to introduce to students what it means to be a student of English language and literature, or even to do PG in English language literature after doing one's undergraduation in some other subject. So I thought this is important because many of the students that study in my department, which is a distance education place, come with certain misunderstandings about what learning English language and literature is all about. So I thought there is this gap to be filled, to explain, try to convey what exactly happens when you take up a course in English language and literature. So many people come to take this course because they know it is all about stories and there is a magic in literature, which is very much true. Many young students also take literature as their subject because they know it is a magical world. But it is something much more than that. So if somebody takes a course in English language literature, believing that it is all about magic that the fantasy world offers, it is not that. It is very much that, but it is much more than that also. So there are a couple of things we need to have clarity about when we do a course in English language and literature. So let me see. As the name of the course, as it exists today in most universities in Kerala, it is called BA in English language and literature, implying that there are two components. One is language, linguistic component, and other is literature, which is a literary component. So we need to keep that in mind. There are two aspects to it. And really, it simply means that once we do this course, we are supposed to have the ability to use the language in practical context. That means when you go out into a context where English is necessary, you should be able to do it. So that is what is meant by the need for communication. I am saying that you do a UG program in English language and literature, and you are supposed to have better skills in using language in actual contexts now, and in the coming years when you attend interviews, when you attend group discussions, when you get a job and interact in the job context, where particularly context outside the mother tongue one, where English becomes the lingua franca, or when you go abroad and use the work and you need English for workplace communication. So that is also a major priority of our courses. And I know in Kerala University in the PG level, new courses are being added which equip the learners to be more, conversant with using the language for job purposes. That is one thing. So after a UG program, many students might take up jobs, but many would want to do further study. They go for their PG, or even the PG students would want to do a PhD or want to write research papers. So a program in English language and literature also need to address this need to teach English for academic purposes. That means for communication, you need one kind of English, which is more focused towards simple language, which is used effectively. You don't use academic language when you are communicating with your colleagues or boss in the workplace. You don't do that. People would think you are being funny. And you wouldn't use that language while you are writing a research paper either, or when you are making a presentation, or when you are doing your PhD project or MPhil project or PG project for that matter. So you need to use an academic language there, which is different from the language we would use in everyday conversations. So that is another priority that we have. a student doing his or her BA in English should also fine tune his or her written language, which needs to be academic. So that is one aim of the learners, and also one commitment of the teachers who need to address this need. Another aspect which comes under language would be meta language. Meta language is learning about how language works, which is also part of a program in English language and literature, which will be addressed in papers like phonetics, in the grammar paper, and also in the linguistics paper. So that is where meta-linguistic skills are sharpened. A normal user of English, a non-English student, I would say, who is doing his biotechnology but learns English, that learner actually may not need much meta-linguistic knowledge. He or she, who is a graduate in BCom perhaps, or an undergraduate who is doing his course, his program in physics, BSc physics, need not have meta-linguistic knowledge. Meta-linguistic knowledge is the ability to talk about language, to say why a particular grammatic expression is more suitable in a context, etc. That is meta-linguistic knowledge, which is again very tricky, because in our context we lay a lot of emphasis on meta language, which often acts as an impediment to our learning itself. When we focus a lot on grammatical terms, we often have a problem with actually using comfortable language. Well, that's another topic, but here I need to emphasize that language student will be looking at meta language also very seriously. So those students who are literature students and teachers, this is one commitment that we have. Linguistics, at least in the basic level, and a very sound knowledge of phonetics, the sound system of English, I would strongly recommend, which is maybe for the exam you will have only a small credit for that, maybe 10 points or 10 marks for that, but in your life it yields about 80 marks. Remember, when you embark upon a career, learning phonetics or learning how to use the right accent and right pronunciation is very, very important and very rewarding. So coming to literature, which is our major focus, literature is very in the simplest level about stories and poems. So as every graduate who comes to learn English knows, there is a lot of stories and poems. So my experience is that many of my students come and tell me that we thought English literature is all stories, poems, novels, etc. But there are so many other papers which are difficult for us. So for one thing, they are not difficult; they are new to you. That's all. And about the just as I told about language, metalinguistic aspects, linguistics, phonetics, etc., also become part of our studies. It's not stories and poems all the time, but though predominantly we have stories and poems. And then non-English specialists also believe that English students and teachers have a very fine time reading and enjoying poetry and stories. But that is again another misconception. We are people who do not just read and enjoy poetry and stories. We are happy people who do that, but we do not just stop there. So there are many other things that we do. So I'll be talking mostly about those things. One important priority is indeed the study of literary genres. And this is when you begin a course, and over the coming years, you will be looking at different literary genres. This genre is a French word, and that's why it's pronounced like that. And it means a literary form. For example, novel is a genre, and under novel there are many sub-genres like epistolary novel, picaresque novel, so many sub-genres can be there, stream of consciousness novel. And we have epics, we have lyric poetry, we have the ode, we have all these are genres. So a thorough knowledge of the various literary forms, literary genres, is also an important thing to us. That is one aspect that will repeatedly appear in our study of language and literature. Literary genres, so from ballads onwards, early forms of writing, up to the very recent ones. People write novels in Twitter now. So all those things. So from what has been happening over the last several a few thousand years become of interest to us. So we do this diachronic study of literature also. We study literature from a historical angle, which is very important. To have the historical knowledge of the literature is very important. And going one step further, we also study the processes behind literature. Literature is there. You have excellent poems, you have excellent books in the library, in the bookstalls, all around. You can have soft copies at your fingertip today. But then a literature student will need to wonder what led to the creation of this work, what went behind, what were the cognitive processes, what were the analytical processes, what were the creative processes that went behind the creation of this work. So that is again a big priority that we have. Just as I said about the meta-linguistic aspect, how language works, we also worry about we concern ourselves with how literature is created. What are the processes behind poetic or other literary creations? That is one concern that we have. Very often we wonder what literature is. Literature, it can be called literary works are vibrant forms of human expression. They are not just dull photographs that we take of reality, but for images that we create with the addition of so many other faculties which are unique to the human being. So it becomes vibrant like that. When we express our experience, rather than document them in a very objective fashion through a photograph or a journal that we write meticulously, like a doctor's journal or a traveler's journal, it is different. We have a different way of expressing these things. That's what the difference between the academic language, I said, and creative language are two different things. So a literary student is concerned about the creativity of a literary work, the creative language, all the big wide spectrum of linguistic expressions that would make a creative work a creative one. But for very practical purposes, we also have this academic language and the language we use in everyday life. Now I have talked about three different languages. One is a language you would use with your friends or with in your job context, or with other students in other part of the world, which will be rather informal. There is the language that there will also be formal in that when you are introducing a speaker in a conference, you are using a formal expression, but again it is in the realm of the communicative language. Going one step further, you have academic language which you would use when you write material for your exam or for other needs like that. But then there is the other one which is tremendous and which is of a wide variety, which is the creative language that we have. So that's where we have papers like creative writing. So that's why I have titled it Vibrant Forms of Human Expression. Human expression becomes very vibrant, while the human experience remain in the realm of ordinary to many people. Very ordinary experiences can be transmuted into a vibrant one through a linguistic expression to it. And literary works introduce us to diverse ways of thinking about the world and life. The world and life is very, very mysterious. We know that. And as people advance in their experience and age, we realize how complex life is, how complex is the way in which the world is structured. And people live and think, though basically we are all very similar to one another in our thoughts and action and desires and our everyday life. there can be a lot of uniqueness in terms of unique experiences, lived experiences in different parts of the world. And that diversity of thinking, diversity of experience, all is encompassed in the works that we learn in literature. And that makes our mind also much broader and wider. And this is in the level of experience and the level of appreciation. Going further, we learn to look at things critically. We may start reading books as naive readers. There are, for example, there's a lot of information that comes in through the social media, in the YouTube, in the Facebook, in the WhatsApp. People make a lot of posts which often do not stand the test of credibility. They may be false news, but many people very eagerly believe such news, which is a dangerous thing. So we need to learn to look at things critically, and that is something that everybody need to learn. And literature helps us to do that. It helps us to look at things critically, not to be very naive in our acceptance of things. So that's another very important thing that a literature student has the benefit of. Now, remember, there is criticism, which is different. Criticism is analyzing a work, but within criticism, there is also the need to go beyond the literary and find out the what shall we say? See beyond the apparent. That is what I would like to say. I wouldn't say it's difficult for us to say to find out what is real, because real is a very elusive thing. So you can at least go beyond what is presented before us and learn not to be very naively accepting whatever comes in front of you in terms of images, in terms of movies, in terms of memes and all those things that we have around us today. And also in life, not to be gulled by people who want to cheat you. Again, thinking and learning critically will be of immense help. So, in short, learning literature helps you become better survivors in life. That's because it teaches you to think critically. It teaches you to read between the lines. And looking at another aspect, a literature student wonder about why and how we create and enjoy art. So while learning literary works on one side, on another side, we also wonder how this literary work is created. This is something that I already mentioned. And we also go beyond that and wonder why we enjoy art. Why we, as early as Aristotle's time, there was attempt to explain why we like watching sad things on the screen, on the stage, or when we read about a sad story, why we feel unhappy. It is very sad, it is very miserable, but still we want to read it and we enjoy it in some way. Why does it happen? What are the reasons for human ability to appreciate art and create art? All these questions are also in our realm. It's also our business to think about all these things. And now things have changed quite a lot since I myself and many people of my age or little older were PG students or college students. At that time, literature, when we said, "What are you doing?" I'm doing my BA in literature. It simply meant I was a student of English literature, which means literature that is produced in England. But today things are not like that. For one thing, by literature you could mean Hindi literature or Malayalam literature or Tamil literature. All literatures could be implied by the word literature. But here I particularly mean English literature. Our courses in English literature. The shape and color of the courses are changing. Maybe in another 10, 15 years, we will not have English literature. We could have a composite program involving multiple languages and multiple literatures. Already such courses are being offered because we are broadening in our knowledge, widening out in our perspective. Our vision is changing, so we could become more and more inclusive in times to come. Already the courses which are notionally named English language and literature are not about English literature. They generally are in the English language, but it is not literature produced in England, as the word originally implies. It's produced by all parts of the world. In England, the literature that is produced in England has now become a very fraction, a small fraction of the wide gamut of literary works that we study. Going one step beyond that, literature courses are not about literature only. That is another very interesting thing. We have papers on film appreciation. We have papers on film studies. We have feminist studies. We have, other topics have come in. So our concern is not with literature alone. Now we also look at many other aspects. And again, within the fold of literature, we bring in other art forms. And so we, literature students, are concerning ourselves with art. We concern ourselves with the artist and also the mind of the artist and the reader. So things have become very, very complex because life in the modern world is very complex, because we have behind us all the knowledge that has been produced over the last several millennia that human beings have existed in this world. We do not think of us as being citizens of India or citizens of any particular nation or a particular region. We think of ourselves as global citizens, and our vision and our knowledge has to be such. So we today, our concerns are much wider than it ever was in the history of mankind. So as I said, today our concern is not even with just literary texts. In fact, all forms of communication are texts to us, not just written text. So you take a paperweight that is on your table with the emblem of your university inside it. That becomes an object, an icon, a cultural artifact, a text which has encoded in it so many meanings, which can be interpreted, understood, appreciated, and also critically looked at. So all forms of communication are texts. Text need not necessarily be something that is written. Images can be texts. Statues can be text. Ornaments can be texts, and become the focus of critical inquiry. So critical inquiry is now central to all our deliberations. We are researchers. We inquire critically why it is there, what it implies to different people. Has there been any exclusions, etc.? So it's a wide range of aspects come in within our inquiry, the range of our inquiry now. And look at the other the topics that today literature scholars for their MPhil, for their PhD, people do take topics from the area of music. The language of ads is an interesting area of research. They all contain text. In music, the notations of the lyrics become the text. Movies, you have immense possibility. Food has become a cultural text. There are people who do their MPhil and PhD on food, how it reflects cultural constructs of various kinds. Dress, buildings, ways of worship, social media, everything that is related to our life could be a topic of interest to a literature student. So we have traveled a lot away from seeing learning literature as learning a few stories. So all kinds of art, and even things in our everyday life, the little things apparently innocent things we do in everyday life, every cultural act become of interest to us and become the focus of critical inquiry as far as a literature student is concerned. So that is where our interest is not in literary works anymore. All kinds of cultural artifacts, including literary works. That is, literary works somehow still predominates, including literary works, which are the product of our urge to connect and share ideas. Why do we do all these things? Why do we create a sculpture? Why do we put up a signboard? Why do we create a painting? It is not for our personal appreciation. There could be a very small fraction of people who would write a poem, who would create a painting, or who would make a clay model for his or her own very private enjoyment. There are such things that can happen, but most of us do these things so that we can show it to somebody else. So somebody else would look at it and see meaning in it, or maybe are able to understand and maybe able to find their own meanings in the art that we create. So, the urge to basic to all our cultural creativity is our urge to connect and share ideas, to express our desires, our hopes, our experience, our agony, our frustrations. All these things are kind of basic to our artistic creativity. The literature student, he is very privileged. He can bring within his area of interest almost any topic under the sky, except those requiring high technical skills. All right, these works that we create, the cultural activities that we involve in, record in different ways in which we human beings see the world and reality. So you can look at the world. The world is objectively there, but your understanding of the world can change from person to person and from time to time, even within one person. So reality is something very, very elusive. Very often literature students people talk about what is the reality, what really happened. The reply is that you will never know. You will never know what really happened anywhere. You yourself may not be very clear about why you did something. So reality is something elusive. That is exactly why literature and art is there. If reality was fixed, reality was very clear, we wouldn't have had to think so widely about it. We wouldn't have had to interpret. So, yeah. And artifacts encode human communication. Artifacts that encode human communication is so often so complex. This is it. Life is complex. Reality is elusive. And the way in which we can depict way in which we can depict our attempt to understand reality is so tricky and so difficult that our attempts become very complex. That is why in 20th century particularly, many works of art are very difficult to understand. Whether it be poetry or painting or movie, they are very difficult. They have become very complex. That is because we are trying to communicate more complex ideas. Because over time we have more and more understanding of what's happening around us, and as we understand more, things become more and more complex. So in our attempt to encode human desires, human understanding of what can be called reality in a work of art, the meaning becomes very, very unclear, further unclear, and the whole work becomes very complex. And this in turn takes us to the aspect of cultural studies and literary theory, which attempt to decode and try to read between the lines and extract meaning from all these works of art. So this is the first part of my presentation today, where I talked about what literature study has become today. Now, in the second part, I am going to talk about, maybe for another 15 minutes, I will be talking about things to be kept in mind while we go about learning or teaching literature. Okay. Here, in fact, I am talking about several misconceptions that literature students and even literature teachers at times have, which are reflected in the answer papers, which are reflected in the presentations made, and which are reflected in the theses that are produced by scholars. So these are plain facts which I would like to re-emphasize a bit. One thing is that there is no ultimate art. You can never talk about a work of art in superlatives, saying this is the best, this is the greatest. This is something we can do informally in your life. You can say that you are the greatest, and this is the best book I ever read. But it remains a subjective experience. You can never say that some writer is the greatest. So when we write in your exam, maybe 40 years, 30 years back, 40 years back, we used to say that, for example, William Wordsworth is the high priest of nature. William Wordsworth is the high priest of nature. That is, you're talking about him in superlatives. There's a big danger in that statement. When I say that William Wordsworth is the high priest of nature, there are many problems with that. Well, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have bothered about it. It was perfectly okay to make this statement. But today, after post-structuralism, after post-modernism, in the present state of post-humanism or whatever we are in, we cannot afford to talk about any writer like that. When you say William Shakespeare is the high priest of nature, you are implying that nobody else in England had that kind of a knowledge of nature as he did, which is impossible, which is a statement we cannot make because we do not know. We do not know. How can we say that? There might have been writers, thinkers who had thought about nature in a higher level, in much more powerful manner. Well, one thing. And again, when you say that he was the high priest of nature, we are excluding all other people in all other parts of the world who were also having similar or different attitude towards nature. So you can, in the present context, you can never talk about any writer in the superlative. You cannot even say that, you cannot even call Shakespeare the bard of Avon, the bard, again, the only bard. That is also, again, has become a very childish statement. Today we look at Wordsworth, we look at Shakespeare with greater levels of objectivity than ever before. So we cannot say that, we cannot use such terms. We can say that we can use other adjectives. Certainly, Shakespeare is a writer who demands a great deal of importance, but we can use other adjectives to talk about. We need better words to talk about, different words to talk about writers rather than the usual superlatives that we use. And again, another important thing is, very often in life also, we think that something is fixed. For example, there is a statement in Cancer Ward, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, where this line I have taken from no one says anything once and for all. Many systems, many religious systems, political systems seem to set down rules and saying you follow these rules and that is all you need to do. Because human lives are often governed by political systems or religious systems, we have this fallacy of falling into the trap of believing that the religion I believe in, or the cult that I follow, or the political system that I am a member of, has ultimately explained everything. That can never be done, because human experience changes constantly, and you can never explain away anything once and for all. So there is nothing conclusive in life. There are no grand narratives. This is a statement that would be a platitude today because we know that all the time. No work is ultimate. There are no grand narratives which cannot be questioned. There is nothing that human beings have created that do not stand questioning. You have the right to question every human creation, including human systems like political systems, religious systems, etc. That is a very important point that we need to remember when we study literature and we write our answers in the exam or write our dissertations. We don't use superlatives anymore. We do not make ultimate statements. We are always tentative in our assumptions. Given from the evidence that is given to us, this appears to be so. Like a lawyer in the court, you say everything that you have to say based on the evidences that we have in the text that is set before you. Another important thing about literary studies, is that we have no high and low art anymore. Again, 30 years back, you would frown upon reading a comic book. I remember when I was a BA student, many of my classmates wouldn't read comics, believing that they were low culture. And, but today we do not think like that. There is no difference between what is high and low culture. High culture would be epic poetry, lyrical poetry, novels written by eminent people like Salman Rushdie or Khushwant Singh, high writing literature. And low art would be the novels that are found in the bookstalls, which are hot, bestsellers, and the serials that happen in the channel, which are soap opera kind of tear-jerking serials. They're all considered to be low art, and comic books are considered to be low art. But that is not so. There is no low and high in the present state of the world. In our present understanding of the world, there are the hierarchies have all been broken. We no longer have, even some words have disappeared. Adiyan, a word like Adiyan, Ayaman, etc., which used to be there in Malayalam everyday usage, maybe 40 years back, no longer used. Democracy has taken over in all walks of life. Even though there is a lot of tyranny still in the world, a lot of people suffer subjugation in so many ways. A lot of people, even in free societies, a lot of segments of society suffer a lot of discrimination. But by and large, the world is becoming more and more inclusive, more and more free. And in this growth of democracy, there has been a great leveling. And in art, both high and art have their functions to perform. So that's something you need. We are not saying that we are equating all these things. They have their individual function. They're all important. Here, the picture I have put is an image on a wall. It's from Bangalore. I took it from the internet, but this is from a wall art in Bangalore. You can see it's a very crude, ordinary kind of wall, and it encodes within it a lot of meaning. So the graffiti, this would be graffiti, is also considered important. You could have your PhD on graffiti. So that is the condition today. We do not scorn any artistic form as low anymore. Another thing that a literature student should always keep in mind is the danger of a single story. If you Google search danger of a single story, it will take you to a video in YouTube, which most of you would have seen. Even if you have seen, I would recommend you to see it again, because it's very important. The danger of a single story. All the problems that the world has today is because of this single story problem. I have my perception. I have my way of looking at the world, understanding the world, and I believe that is the story. But the person who is sitting with me, my partner, my friend, my children, my colleagues, they all experience the same thing, but they might have another story to say. My story is based on my experience, my mental makeup, my sensibility, my personality. What looks okay for me need not be okay for another person. So all the problems we have, the gender problems that we have, the all kinds of discrimination within society, is because people go about with a single story. The West looks down upon us and classify us as the Orient because they have their single story. So in life, nothing is black and white. Nothing is very simple. You cannot classify things as good. Okay, this is okay, this is not okay. It's very difficult. What you classify as not okay might become okay in some other context. So you cannot classify life, you cannot compartmentalize life into good and bad, black and white binaries. Reality, truth, facts, etc. are very, very elusive. You cannot say this is the truth, this is the reality, because truth is often multifaceted. The facts are also multifaceted. But we always like to have a simple explanation. But you can never have a simple or a single explanation to anything in life. So that's why, and particularly when we talk about complex works of art, they can be, you can have innumerable phases and innumerable aspects to it. So you cannot be happy with one version of a story. Every vision, every understanding is prejudiced to some extent. That is why in attempting to set down the meaning of a work of art, you have to be cautious. You cannot never be very definite. You cannot say, for example, when you write you cannot say this is the authorial intention, or this William Wordsworth means that. You can never even say that. You do not know what he meant. Even he would not have known what he meant when he wrote down that poetry, because we ourselves know that from our experience. You sometimes think, why did I say that? I could have said it differently. Why did I do that at that moment? So it's very, very unreliable. The human aspect is very unreliable. So you can never say this is what he meant. And even if he had an intention, that is not our concern, because reading a text or looking at a work of art in different periods of time, through different glasses that we have, depending on our mood and our sensibility, we could have different meanings. Sometimes the work escapes the author, and the meaning or multiple meanings are created in the minds of the reader through their experience. So you can never say this line means this. You could say that the writer seems to suggest. You have to be tentative all the time. You can only be tentative. You can never be definite, except for some very, very common facts. It's very difficult to be very definite. You can say the writer seems to suggest so. You can never definitely say this is what he meant, because you do not know what he meant. The author is very unreliable. And so rather than saying this is the meaning of this line, you could say this line could mean this. So very often students come up with questions, so what does this line mean? I do not understand. The fact is, it is not a compulsory thing that you should have a clarity about those lines. Your attempt at critical inquiry, your attempt at trying to say what it is what is important. In a literature exam paper, there are no definite answers. There are no uniform answers. If an answer paper and another answer paper looks the same, it's a tragedy. Every student is a connoisseur of that particular art he is dealing with, and his answer has to be different. There might be similarity, but different. So there are no definites. And your lack of definiteness is shown by the tentativeness of your language. And we are nearing the conclusion, and this is the last but one point that I have. No text stands alone. So very often we believe that a work of art is an isolated entity. It's not like that. A new text is not absolutely new. You never say something that nobody has ever said before. Whatever you say will be a restatement of something that has happened before. So it's said that every text is built on all other texts that has happened before. So I am a person whose sensibility has been shaped by all the experiences that I have had in my life, including the books I have read, including the movies I have watched, including the interactions I have had with people, including the songs I have listened to. So whatever I attempt to create, whether when I write a poem or I write the lyrics of a song, all this experience will tell on it. So no text stands alone. Every text has so many other implications in it. Therefore, there are innumerable implied meanings that could be encoded in a text, which you will know only if you have also read that text which the author has read. That's why you need to have a wide reading across time and culture. Why I said across time and culture is a literature student should read current works. So you should constantly read books that are written in our own times, in our own language, our own idiom. We'll understand that better. But we should also have this diachronic knowledge. A non-literature student needs to read only the current works. He is liberated. But we, literature students, have the commitment to read earlier texts also. I've said across time and culture means, for example, and if you want to be a very good literature student, you should also have a very good knowledge of Malayalam literature. You should know Martanda Varma, you should know Indulekha, you should know Bashir, you should know Vallathol. You should have a reasonably good understanding of Malayalam literature if you want to be a very good English language scholar, English literature scholar. So you need to have this familiarity across time and culture. So, we all work with a syllabus. We all work with a curriculum before us, and these are the texts for study. But actually, those are not only the texts for study. The syllabus that you have is only a sample. That is something that we often forget. Because a literature student is supposed to learn everything related to literature. That is not possible. So in order to help him remain oriented, you have a syllabus before him. That is slightly artificial. But don't think the syllabus is the thing you have to study. Learning happens beyond the classroom and beyond the syllabus. You need to walk that extra mile. If you want to be a very effective scholar in your domain, literature domain, you always will have to walk the extra mile. Read the books that are not mentioned in the syllabus. Constantly read other books as well. I know constraints are there. You would say that, no, I don't have time. You have time. Because for the exam, you are not supposed to chew up a particular book totally and extract and keep in the exam. You have to have the familiarity, but this familiarity is enhanced by reading books related to it which are not in the syllabus. Watch movies which are related to the works you have to study. Walk that extra mile. Read widely and also constantly write. A literature student cannot escape writing. Very often people complain, I could not complete the exam. I could not write the essay properly. My annotation did not work well. This is because we don't have practice in writing. A literature student has to write something every day. Every day. Every student has to write something to improve their writing skills. But a literature student has to keep this in mind. You can write creatively if you want. If you that's a talent that some people have. If you have talent to write poetry, fine, write that. But what I meant is write something related to the syllabus that you have or a book you have read. Write something. Practice both academic and creative writing. You need to develop these two things parallel. You should have a language that is very nice to read, which is appealing. That's creative. When you write a letter, it should be appealing. Should not be artificial. Should not sound stilted. That will come only when you constantly write something. Keep a diary, for example. Write about your experiences. That will be very natural. You must also practice academic writing because you have, for the exam, you cannot write the other kind of English. The creative English is for creative writing and academic English is for academic writing. So this is all that I have to say today. Thank you very much again